Thank you, Count Corla. I learned in the last couple of days from a constituent that it is the practice of the ESB to apply a low usage charge at a fixed rate of €38.28 for a 66-day period. Where usage drops below 125 kilowatt hours, the low usage charge applies. It is, Count Corla, the practice of a state-owned body to penalise consumers for reducing their electricity consumption. Currently, the Minister encourages consumers to reduce the amount of time they spend in the shower, the times they use their washing machines and dishwashers and other such measures to reduce their ESB bills, in the full knowledge that this is a complete fallacy, as those low-income earners and pressed middle classes will be the subject of a low usage charge should they take his advice. It is patently clear that the Minister is completely out of touch with reality and the challenges of those in middle-income classes in rural Ireland. Perhaps the Minister could explain why Electric Ireland is being allowed to charge higher standing orders to those customers who use low levels of electricity. Surely any sensible energy or climate policy should be rewarding those who use less energy rather than punishing them. Last year, I was one of only 10 deputies to vote against the Climate Action Bill. My decision is now vindicated, particularly when I see the consequences on the people of rural Ireland. My opposition to the bill was not as a climate change denier, but as a realist. My opposition to it is because I know that the solutions being proposed to deal with climate change are contradictory, ineffective and will tax the poorest in society. This practice of charging higher fees to people who use less electricity is just another example in a long list of contradictions when it comes to the government's approach to climate change. Different members of the government seem to be pointing the blame for the cost of living crisis at the invasion of Ukraine. The reality is that the biggest cause of the cost of living crisis has been the implementation of poorly thought out energy policies, which have resulted in rising costs coupled with the consequences of Brexit. Policies such as shutting down energy production in Ireland and instead importing peat from Eastern Europe, banning gas exploration and instead having to buy Russian gas abroad, imposing carbon taxes on fuel and home heating oil and then applying VAT on the tax. These are just some examples of how government behaviour has contributed to the current problems. Today's bill looks at carbon credits, another fallacy policy, which basically says that we don't care how much CO2 is emitted as long as it's outsourced to some other country. Government policy penalises our own farmers with taxes, regulations and charges, whilst indirectly encouraging imported products from places like Brazil, where thousands of acres of rainforest have been removed to create room to meet their farming needs, which have been produced in a non-environmentally friendly way and then transported here using the very fuel that the government is trying to encourage us not to use. In full view of the obvious headwinds that face our small island economy, the government are hell-bent on proceeding with an increase in carbon tax. It appears the government does not realise that raising prices will make inflation worse. They are willing to ignore the fact that this will penalise the most marginalised in society. They are prepared to ignore the obvious disastrous consequences for our economy in terms of unemployment and wage demands. The people need initiatives that will deal with inflation, not initiatives that will compound inflation. All of this at a time when our economy faces serious challenges as a result of the war and the energy crisis. Let me just highlight again who these carbon taxes affect the most. They affect the people on lower and middle incomes. These are the people who spend the highest percentage of their income on essentials such as heating and food. Low-income earners are the least able to afford to retrofit houses or to buy a new electric vehicle. Retrofitting will benefit those on higher incomes, not the squeezed middle. People in rural areas of Ireland do not have the facility of public transport to avail of to replace their car journey or to go to work to help to reduce their carbon footprint. They mostly have no choice but to use their car, which today they can no longer afford. Carbon taxes are anti-poor, anti-rural and anti-logic, and should not be implemented without first having an alternative that the consumer can avail of. If the carbon tax increase goes ahead in May, it would be another clear public demonstration that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are willing to ignore the struggling people and instead capitulate once again to the Green Party's agenda to ensure government does not fall. It isn't too late for the government to do the right thing, and I say it again. Government must remove their 55% tax take from all fuel until the war is over and risks have abated. It will save jobs, it will save the economy and maintain the standard of living. And I put this proposal to the House 2 months ago. Some in government condemned it as the madness from a mad cow. Well, it appears some economists are now catching the same mad cow disease and are now agreeing with that proposal. David McWilliams, to note today a similar view, and others on this side of the House, thankfully now beginning to see these policies being of no benefit to the people. Events are beginning to resemble 2008 more and more by the day. The application of carbon taxes is Cromwellian and will tax the majority in society into penury. The people will not stand for it, and neither will I.